You know, in the world of geopolitics, some projects are so big, they don't just build roads, they try to redraw the entire map of global power. Today, we're diving into one of the absolute biggest, the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. CPEC, as everyone calls it, is so much more than concrete and steel. You really have to think of it as a massive strategic bet, the crown jewel of China's huge Belt and Road Initiative, designed to connect a rising superpower right to the heart of the world's most critical shipping lanes. So to really wrap our heads around this thing, we've got to start with a basic question. What's the grand vision here? I mean, why are these two nations pouring billions of dollars into a project that cuts through some of the toughest terrain on the planet? Okay, so at its core, CPEC is basically this giant collection of projects. And I mean giant. We're talking power plants, highways, railways, and ports, the whole shebang. It's all designed to completely overhaul Pakistan's economy and physically connect it straight to Western China. And it's been in the works now for over a decade. But here's the thing. The motivations for each country are pretty different. For China, it's all about strategic security. It's about getting what analysts call an exit to the ocean. This gives them a direct, secure line to the Indian Ocean, which is a massive strategic win. For Pakistan, though, the goals are much more immediate. Finally fixing these crippling power outages, updating ancient infrastructure, and just trying to kickstart an economy that badly needs a jolt. All right, so now let's talk about the promise of CPEC, the actual stuff being built on the ground to make this vision happen. And seriously, the scale of it all is just staggering. The plan itself is incredibly ambitious, touching on basically every important sector. It's about adding thousands of megawatts of new power to the grid. It's about building modern highways and railways that connect the country from top to bottom. And it's about setting up new industrial zones. But really, the absolute crown jewel of the entire project is Gwadar, this once sleepy fishing village that's being transformed into a massive deep seaport. And this right here gets us to the geopolitical heart of the whole thing. To really, truly understand CPEC, you have to understand why this one remote port, Gwadar, is so incredibly important to Beijing's global strategy. This introduces a really critical idea, the Malacca dilemma. Now, this term, which comes from a U.S. Naval War College report, really gets to the core of one of China's biggest strategic weaknesses. Okay, so get this. The vast majority of China's imported oil and gas has to travel through the Strait of Malacca. It's a very narrow, very crowded, and strategically very vulnerable shipping lane. The Gwadar route is a potential game changer, an overland pipeline and road network from the Arabian Sea straight to Western China could, at least in theory, slash those supply lines and protect China's energy flow from being disrupted. But while China is playing this big strategic game, what's the reality for Pakistan on the ground? Well, for Islamabad, CPEC is a story of incredible hope, but also of growing fear. It's a really high-stakes balancing act between development and debt. The hopes were crystal clear and, frankly, totally understandable. The dream was to finally put an end to the constant blackouts that have just hammered the country for years, to build modern highways and railways to boost trade, and to bring in a huge flood of foreign investment. The ultimate goal? More jobs, a stronger economy, basically a total economic transformation. But, of course, that kind of transformation doesn't come cheap. The years since CPEC kicked off have seen Pakistan's national debt climb significantly. And that has led to a lot of international scrutiny about whether these massive Chinese loans are actually sustainable in the long run. And the financial risks are really complicated. Take this idea of circular debt. So Pakistan builds all these brand new, efficient power plants, but then they plug them into an old, inefficient power grid that loses money. So what happens? The new projects, which were supposed to be profitable, just end up adding to this mountain of spiraling debt. It's a classic case of a solution creating a whole new problem. So you've got the money worries. But beyond that, the grand vision of CPEC has also slammed into some pretty harsh realities on the ground. We're starting to see some serious cracks appear in the corridor. This quote really highlights the gap between the hype and what's actually happening. According to analysts, even though we talk about the corridor like it's a done deal, progress has been really slow. Sure, a few roads have been built and the port is there, but that seamless, super efficient network connecting China to the sea, it's still mostly on paper. And a huge reason for the slow progress is security, or, the lack of it. Analysts have started calling Pakistan's situation a three-body problem. See, it's not just one threat. It's three different overlapping security crises: the Afghan Taliban, the Pakistani Taliban, or TTP, and the long-simmering Baloch insurgency. They all have different goals and alliances, and it creates this incredibly chaotic and dangerous environment. And the human cost here is just staggering. In 2024 alone, the Baloch insurgency was linked to over 1,000 deaths, and CPEC projects are a top target for their attacks. Why? Well, for many Baloch nationalists, the corridor looks like outsiders exploiting their resource-rich province, while the local people get very little benefit. The problems aren't just about security. They're about basic business, too. Before a Chinese company took over Gwadar Port, it was actually run by PSA of Singapore, one of the best, most respected port operators on the planet. And they couldn't make it work. They couldn't turn a profit. And you have to ask yourself, if a global leader like that failed, what does that say about the port's real commercial viability? Now, none of this is happening in a vacuum. CPEC is a massive move on the geopolitical chessboard, and it's forcing every other major power in the region to react. It's like the old 19th century great game is being reimagined for the 21st century. So, what does the neighborhood think? Well, India is strongly against it. They see CPEC as a violation of their sovereignty and part of a bigger Chinese strategy to encircle them. The United States has been pretty vocal in its skepticism, warning about the risks of so-called debt trap diplomacy. And in a really interesting twist, the Gulf states, like the UAE and Saudi Arabia, have started making their own investments nearby, jumping into this new competition over trade routes and influence. And it's important to remember, CPEC isn't the only game in town. Other major powers, especially India, are backing their own competing trade corridors. So you end up with this complex web of rival projects crisscrossing the region, all fighting to become the main trade artery of the future. So after all this time and all this money, where does that leave us? The truth is, the outcome of this whole massive gamble is nowhere near guaranteed. Its success really hinges on whether Pakistan and China can solve these huge interlocking problems, from the security threats to the mounting debt to the very real challenge of winning over the local people whose lands the corridor is built on. At the end of the day, CPEC isn't a simple good or bad story. It's not a miracle that will solve all of Pakistan's problems, and it's not a guaranteed doomsday of debt either. It's just a messy, complicated, and incredibly high-stakes tangle of geopolitics, economics, and strategy, all layered on top of each other. Which really leaves us with the ultimate question, doesn't it? When all the dust settles, will the China-Pakistan economic corridor go down in history as a brilliant strategic masterstroke that reshaped a whole region? Or will it become a cautionary tale, a multi-billion-dollar dream that just collapsed under the weight of its own ambition? Only time will tell.